For many years, Iran projected an image of immense strength across the Middle East. It was a regional power built on a very specific and carefully crafted strategy. The leaders in Tehran did not rely on a conventional army that could match the world's superpowers. Instead, they developed a different kind of might, one designed to deter enemies and extend their influence far beyond their own borders. This power rested on three main pillars that made the Islamic Republic look formidable. These pillars were meant to create a fortress of fear, ensuring that no adversary would dare to challenge the regime directly. It was a strategy of asymmetrical warfare, where Iran could fight its battles without engaging in a full-scale head-to-head conflict it knew it could not win. The first pillar of this fortress was its vast and ever-growing missile arsenal. Iran spent decades developing a sophisticated program of ballistic and cruise missiles. These weapons were not just for show, they were a core part of its national defense and a tool for intimidation. The regime paraded these missiles in grand military displays, sending a clear message to its rivals, particularly Israel and the United States. The idea was that Iran could strike any target within the region at a moment's notice. This capability was meant to make any potential attacker think twice, creating a powerful deterrent that protected the regime from direct assault. The missiles were the regime's long-range sword, held menacingly over the heads of its neighbors. The second pillar was its controversial nuclear program. While Iran always insisted its nuclear ambitions were for peaceful energy purposes, the world suspected otherwise. The program allowed Iran to accumulate knowledge and materials, bringing it to the very brink of being able to build a nuclear weapon. This created a profound sense of ambiguity and fear. The prospect of a nuclear-armed Iran was a nightmare scenario for its enemies. This nuclear threshold status was a powerful bargaining chip in international negotiations and a key element of its long-term security strategy. It was a shadow weapon, its power lying more in its potential than in its actual existence, keeping adversaries perpetually on edge. Finally, the third pillar was its network of proxy forces. Iran cultivated and funded a web of allied militias across the Middle East, from Hezbollah in Lebanon to the Houthis in Yemen and various groups in Iraq and Syria. This axis of resistance allowed Iran to wage war by proxy, fighting its battles in other countries and through other soldiers. This strategy was brilliant in its own way, as it kept conflict away from Iranian soil and gave the regime plausible deniability. These groups acted as extensions of Tehran's will, destabilizing its rivals and expanding its sphere of influence without risking its own forces in direct confrontation. This network was Iran's invisible army, creating chaos for its foes across the region. The turning point for Iran's carefully constructed fortress came on October 7, 2023, when its proxy, Hamas, launched a devastating attack on Israel. The regime in Tehran saw it as a moment of triumph. It was a demonstration of the axis of resistance's power to inflict pain on its greatest enemy. Iran encouraged its other allies, particularly Hezbollah and the Houthis, to open new fronts against Israel. The goal was to bog Israel down in a multi-front war, stretch its resources thin, and showcase the collective strength of Iran's network. For a brief period, it seemed as though Iran's long-term strategy was paying off, as the entire region was plunged into a new and dangerous phase of conflict. However, the response from Israel was not what Iran had anticipated. Instead of being paralyzed, Israel launched a relentless military campaign that began to systematically dismantle Iran's proxy network. The war in Gaza severely weakened Hamas, stripping it of its ability to govern or mount significant attacks. In Lebanon, a prolonged and brutal conflict with Hezbollah degraded the group's military capabilities more than ever before. Then, in a stunning blow to Iran's logistical network, the Assad regime in Syria, a crucial ally and land bridge for weapons shipments to Hezbollah, collapsed in December 2024 under immense internal and external pressure. The very pillars of Iran's forward defense began to crumble, one by one. Feeling the pressure and seeing its strategic position weaken, Iran decided it needed to act directly. It sought to re-establish its deterrence and project an image of strength. In April and again in October of 2024, Tehran launched two of the largest ballistic missile and drone attacks in history, aimed directly at Israel. These were supposed to be shocking displays of Iran's military prowess, but the result was a catastrophic failure for the regime, An overwhelming majority of the hundreds of missiles and drones were intercepted by a coordinated defense system involving Israel, the United States, and other regional partners. The attacks did minimal damage, but they did something far worse for Iran. They exposed its offensive capabilities as a paper tiger. The failure of these massive missile strikes was a profound humiliation for Iran's leaders. The regime had played its strongest card, and it had been easily countered. Instead of looking powerful, Iran looked weak and ineffective. Its once feared missile arsenal was revealed to be vulnerable to modern air defense technologies. This miscalculation fundamentally altered the strategic balance. Iran's enemies, particularly Israel, now saw that the regime's ultimate weapon was not as threatening as once believed. The Fortress of Illusions had developed a massive crack, and Iran's adversaries were now emboldened to strike at the heart of the regime's power without fear of a devastating retaliation. The final devastating blow came in June 2025. Convinced that Iran's deterrent was broken, Israel launched a series of precise and overwhelming surprise attacks. The operation was not a ground invasion, but a surgical decapitation strike aimed at the very core of Iran's military and nuclear infrastructure. In a matter of hours, Israeli warplanes and missiles struck targets across the country with shocking accuracy. They hit critical command and control centers, major missile production facilities, and key nuclear sites. The strikes were designed to cripple the regime's ability to wage war and to neutralize its most dangerous programs for the foreseeable future. The fortress was not just cracked, it was being systematically dismantled. The human cost for the Iranian regime was catastrophic. The strikes killed a significant portion of its senior military leadership. Among the dead were Mohammad Bagheri, the Chief of Staff of the entire Armed Forces, and Hossein Salami, the powerful commander of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. The architect of the missile program, Amir Ali Hajizadeh, was also eliminated, along with numerous other top generals and key nuclear scientists. This was a decapitation strike in the truest sense. It removed an entire generation of military expertise and leadership, leaving the armed forces in a state of chaos and disarray. While Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei survived, he was now surrounded by a vacuum of command. Iran's defenses, which were supposed to protect the nation from such an attack, failed spectacularly. The country's air defense systems, a mix of older Russian technology and domestically produced equipment, were either destroyed in the initial wave of attacks or proved completely ineffective against the sophisticated Israeli assault. When Iran tried to retaliate, launching hundreds of its remaining missiles at Israel, the results were once again lackluster. While a few missiles managed to penetrate Israeli defenses, the response was feeble compared to the damage Iran had sustained. The regime's sword and shield had both been shattered in a single night. The aftermath of the strikes left Iran's power in ruins. Its nuclear program, the regime's ultimate insurance policy, was severely damaged. The above-ground enrichment facility at Natanz was destroyed, and other key components were left inoperable. While some underground facilities and a stockpile of enriched uranium may have survived, the program's value as a deterrent was gone for now. Similarly, the missile program was in tatters. Stockpiles were depleted, launch sites were destroyed, and the factories needed to build new ones were in ruins. The military machine that Iran had spent decades building was now broken, leaving the country more vulnerable than it had been in generations. Today, on June 18th, 2025, the Iranian regime stands at a perilous crossroads, facing an existential dilemma. The pillars of its power have collapsed, and its leaders must now make a choice that will determine the future of the nation. One path is to accept the new reality. This would mean compromising with the international community, abandoning its nuclear ambitions for good, dismantling its missile program, and cutting off support for its remaining proxy forces. For the hardliners who have built their entire identity on defiance and resistance, this option is seen as total surrender. It would be an admission of defeat that could shatter their legitimacy and potentially lead to the collapse of the regime from within. The other path is to escalate. Supreme Leader Khamenei has vowed severe punishment, and the regime could try to rally the Iranian people around the flag for a continued fight. This could involve trying to secretly rebuild its programs, or even making a desperate dash to assemble a crude nuclear device with whatever materials it has left. This path would turn Iran into an international pariah, similar to North Korea. It would invite even more devastating military action, complete economic collapse, and total isolation from the rest of the world. It is a gamble that risks the very survival of the country in a final, desperate act of defiance against seemingly insurmountable odds. The future for Iran is deeply uncertain. Its position as a regional power has been shattered. The country that once projected strength across the Middle East is now exposed as militarily vulnerable and strategically isolated. Its economy, already struggling under sanctions, faces ruin as oil prices spike and international trade grinds to a halt. The Iranian people are caught in the middle, with protests erupting that show a mix of nationalist anger at Israel and deep-seated frustration with their own government. The regime's iron grip on power, once seemingly unbreakable, now appears more fragile than ever before. It has lost the fear it once inspired. Ultimately, the story of Iran's fall is a cautionary tale about the illusion of power. For decades, the regime invested in the tools of asymmetrical warfare, believing that missiles, proxies, and a nuclear shadow could make it invincible. But in the end, this strategy proved to be a house of cards. The events that began in October 2023 and culminated in the devastating strikes of 2025 have fundamentally rewritten the balance of power in the Middle East. Iran is no longer the fearsome puppet master pulling strings across the region. It is now a weakened nation facing a stark choice between surrender and self-destruction, its future hanging precariously in the balance.